Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 10th Sunday live stream for studentloanjustice.org. My name is Alan Collins, founder of Student Loan Justice. We are the oldest, largest, and pretty much only group, the only true grassroots citizens group fighting only and absolutely for student loan justice. So I hope everybody is doing well out there in the world. It's a good day on this end. We had a good week last week. Before I begin, let me just say, I've got a friend, a guy that I played basketball with at the YMCA for like 6 years, from when he was like 10 to when he was like 16 years old. And he, believe it or not, made it to the NBA. He's been in the league for about, I think, 8 years now or something, 9 years. He got injured badly like 3 years ago. And everybody counted this guy out. Oh, and by the way, he's the shortest player in the NBA. Everybody counted him out after a really super bad injury like 2-3 years ago. And he's been barely hanging on in the league by his fingernails since his injury, a hip injury. But anyways, he finally managed to just barely snag onto a 10-day contract with the Charlotte Hornets a couple months ago. And it's a critical time in the season right now. They're right on the bubble of the playoffs. Looks like they're going to make it, thankfully. But anyways, my friend from way back in the day, he came in and he was getting very little minutes the past couple weeks or so. But they threw him in off the bench, didn't play a minute today in the third quarter. And this man scored 14 points in like 6 or 7 minutes and sealed that game for the Charlotte Hornets. So to Isaiah Thomas out there, let me just say, good game, my man. That is what I'm talking about. I'm telling you guys, he's the most exciting player in the NBA, and he is every underdog's hero. So well done, Isaiah. I am just so thrilled. Anyways, I hope everybody is doing well out there in the world. We had ourselves speaking of underdogs, we had a pretty good week last week. So on Friday, we were interviewed by Fox News, Dana Perino. We did an hour-long interview, and that went very well. I hope you'll have a look at it. It was a tough interview, a very tough interview, as we can expect from here on out, certainly from conservative stations. But it went very well. We answered all of the tough questions, and we've been sharpening the sword for many years. We love going into the lion's den, or in this case, the fox's den, as it were, and answering all of the tough questions. Very few people out there, if any, besides us, that are willing and able to do that. So as much as you can spread that interview around, and find us on Twitter, and you can see the pinned post. You can see the interview for yourself. Retweet that tweet, but more importantly, and I hate Twitter, but quote tweet that tweet to as many conservative news organizations as you possibly can. We would love to be doing interviews like that in the Lions or Fox's Den every day, twice a day, 3 times a day. That is where this battle is won, ladies and gentlemen. We can preach to the choir all day long and we'll get nowhere. It's convincing our opposition is where we will win this battle. And our opposition is out in force right now. I don't know, for those of you who have been paying close attention, but our opposition has turned the volume up to 11. And they are not going to stop. One interesting wrinkle in that is that for the past, let's say 2 months or so, 2-3 months, since our opposition's been completely freaked out, they've been talking primarily about how student loan cancellation will benefit the wealthy. That is false. That is demonstrably and provably false. And we've written articles exactly to that point and given interviews. It's nonsense. Canceling student loans will largely benefit the unwealthy. Well, here we are now that inflation is a thing, and it looks like our opposition is now changing horses. And now the claim is that canceling student loans will hurt inflation. And I'm going to get to that point in a minute. That's what I want to talk about tonight. But first, let me answer. We had a question from one of our friends and members and allies, Lisa Ansel at the University of Southern California there in Los Angeles. She wanted me to go over the question quickly of how it is that canceling student loans will not add to the national debt. And if I said or didn't say, if you have any questions or comments on Twitter or on Facebook, I am just very happy to answer them if I can see them. Hopefully I can see them. Looks like we're okay on Twitter. So how is it that canceling student loans will not add to the national debt? And here is how that is. So first of all, the national debt is defined as the sum of all monies owed by the federal government. So in this most recent COVID crisis, we saw the national debt grow by trillions of dollars. We had to fund these PPP loans and stimulus checks and other stimulus doled out to millionaires and billionaires. And in order to do most of that stimulus, we had to take money from the Treasury and give it to the wealthiest 20% of earners by and large through these PPP loans. But yeah, money had to be drawn from the Treasury to do that. So it all added to the national debt. For canceling student loans, the taxpayers paid for those loans many years ago, and they didn't pay anywhere near $1.6 trillion, by the way. They probably paid like $3 or $4, maybe $500, $600 billion. But the government has made back a ton of money on that, just as an aside. So, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, the taxpayers paid for these loans many years ago. All the adding to the national debt that was ever going to happen for these student loans happened many years ago. The loans can be canceled without congressional approval, without congressional appropriation, without drawing even one nickel from the federal Treasury. So we don't have to sell T-bond, federal bonds, and so forth. We do not have to spend money, don't have to take money from the Treasury in order to cancel these loans. They can be canceled tomorrow, and no money would be drawn from the Treasury, and not one penny would be added to the national debt. It's a very important distinction between canceling student loans and, these PPP loans, other stimulus that we've done. So it's a very important point. There is no quicker, easier way to stimulate the economy. So I hope that's clear. But it's certainly true. And this is a very strong selling point for us among conservatives and just the nation generally. Hey, Kelly Kessler says, will do. And Doug Grostefan says, we are here for your Allens. Will spread widely. Yes, please do that. Definitely. That interview, that Fox interview, guys, it's gold for us. We have to go more into the lion's den and answer all the tough questions. We did the same thing on Saturday on Coast to Coast, by the way. That's a fairly conservative audience. That's where the rubber meets the road, guys. That's where this battle is won. So as I said, tonight, I want to talk about the new question. Our opposition clearly, I think, has realized that this nonsense they're saying about how canceling student loans will benefit the wealthy, it's just nonsense. And I think they know that it is. But their new trick, their new horse in this race, apparently, and we heard it from swamp reporter Matthew Iglesias today at Bloomberg and in the Washington Post. The new claim is that canceling student loans, oh no, we can't cancel student loans. It'll exacerbate inflation. And guys, this is absolutely wrong. And here's why. It's very simple, actually. The inflation we're seeing today is by and large not because there's a whole bunch of people with a ton of money and they are chasing around too few goods to purchase. No. It's not a demand pushed inflation. It is exactly the other thing. It's a supply pull inflation. It's a logistical crisis. It's a shipping thing. It's a fertilizer thing. It has everything to do with what's going on the supply side of the equation, not the demand side. So, canceling student loans is not going to contribute to the inflation that we're seeing. On the other hand, what canceling student loans will do is allow the 45 million student loan borrowers in the country, 40 million of whom were never going to be able to repay their loans even before the pandemic. It will allow them to do things like, I don't know, pay their rent, buy food, buy gas. I'm sure some people did tremendously well during this pandemic on the upper 20% income bracket of this coin, or whatever you want to say. I'm sure a lot of millionaires and billionaires did just astonishingly well through this pandemic. Student loan borrowers did not. We are feeling the pointy end of the inflation stick, like all the middle working lower classes are. Our rents have been jacked. A couple dollar rise in the price of gas hurts us way more than it hurts wealthy people. Price of food, you name it. We know about inflation. We are actually on the pointy end of that stick. So it's not right now, it's not the difference between going out and being able to buy a Harley Davidson or even buy a house at this juncture. Right now, canceling student loans and the monthly income that would free up for 45 million student loan borrowers, by and large, is going to go to pay for those things. So it's not going to push inflation up. It's nonsense. It's a very cheap shot, by the way. There's the talk of the news, this news cycle for probably quite a few into the future, in the months ahead, is going to be all about inflation, this, inflation, that. So it's the new buzzword. And our opposition is shamelessly seizing this buzzword and using it. This is a really funny story, but it's funny, but really it's maddening. This really terrible company called SoFi, they've been trying very hard to get these loans turned back on. Thankfully, they failed. But they have been pushing incredibly hard to get these loans turned back on. And a couple of weeks ago, they did a 2-page lobbying memo, a lobbying sheet, a 2-pager that they said to the president, and I think the vice president, and I think Susan Rice, Ambassador Rice, and other people. 2 pages of just shameless lobbying, pandering, I don't even know what you call it, making every argument, throwing the kitchen sink into the argument that the loans should be turned back on. And in this 2-page memo, they mentioned inflation not less than 10 times. 2 pages, inflation mentioned 10 times. So this is obviously the new buzzword du jour for our opposition. And it is ridiculous. And every time you see it in print or in an article or in comments on Twitter or Facebook, you should take it upon yourself to stand up and make the argument that I just said. It's nonsense. We have to stomp this out at the bud. Our opposition is going to have to change horses yet again if they want to come up with something that's going to beat us. And hint, hint, there is no other horse in this race. Our opposition has nothing. They have nothing. We win this argument 100% of the time. We won it on Fox on Friday. We've won it, in fact, going back to the beginning of this group, we've never lost an argument. But our argument becomes even stronger today. And as time goes on, it becomes even stronger still. Anybody trying to fight against loan cancellation, here's the big answer to them. These loans will be canceled. These loans will not be paid. No matter what anybody does, says, thinks, emotes, feels, doesn't do, in Washington, D.C., or at the Washington Post or Bloomberg or Forbes magazine or any of these mainstream corporate swamp media outlets, no matter what they do or say, think, or feel, what I just said is true. The loans will not be paid. The loans will be canceled. Whether they're canceled tomorrow or whether this is a very long, painful, dystopian, civilly unrestful unwinding, well, that remains to be seen. We are fighting for a good, quick, clean death that leaves people happy, that stimulates the economy, that shores up the middle class. And I know that sounds profound, but it's very true. And doesn't turn 40 million people into seethingly resentful and unpatriotic people. No, we don't want that bad death. We want the good, clean death, where all the idiots in Washington, D.C. acknowledge this catastrophically failed lending scam for what it is, does the right thing, cancels these loans, comes up with a better way to fund higher education, cheaper, better, more rationally priced way to fund colleges in this country, and we proceed thusly. That is the good death. We don't want that bad death because it will be ugly. People will probably die. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I'm just saying, guys, we need these loans canceled. The country needs these loans canceled. This is the camel's nose under the tent. And by the way, let me just back up what I just said. The loans will not be paid. The loans will be canceled. Before the pandemic, the majority, in fact, the large majority, nearly 2/3 of all federal student loan borrowers were not paying on their loans. I kid you not. 64.3% of all federal student loan borrowers were not paying on their student loans before the pandemic. Now, even if and some of those people were in school, that's true. But even discounting them, not even counting the people who are in school, it's still 57% of all federal student loan borrowers who were eligible, should have been paying, were not paying. So that's before the pandemic. Now, here during the pandemic, almost nobody is paying. And I'm sorry, guys, the pandemic was the nail in the coffin of this lending scam, thankfully. Whenever they try and turn the loans back on, very few people will pay. I will be surprised if a couple months after they turn the loans back on, if even 20% of everybody is paying. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Federal student loans are vanishing into a mist of illegitimacy as we speak, and there's no way that's going to change. I see no way that's going to change. I don't see inflation getting super better. I don't see the economy all of a sudden getting on rocket fuel, where all these people who've been screwed by these student loans, all of a sudden are like, yeah, I can, and I will all of a sudden start paying on my loans. No, it's not going to happen. People have mentally written these loans off. I have. You probably have too. So that's just kind of like reality. And the people in Washington, D.C. can either accept it or not. Right now, they're still fighting it. They're still in the denial phase. It would be far better for them, particularly the Democrats in power right now, who would like to maybe have a chance at holding onto their power, to acknowledge the fact of what I just said, and quite frankly, throw the towel in on this lending system. It's time to take this lending scam to the bath and drown it in the tub. Lending systems fail from time to time. It happens. It's not that big of a deal. Look at the subprime home mortgage crisis. Default rate for those loans was 20%. We now know that the default rate for federal student loans was 40% for 2004 students. And they were only borrowing a third of what's being borrowed today. Lending systems fail from time to time, sometimes spectacularly. Look at the S&L crisis of the mid-'80s, failed lending system. I would argue that this lending system is far worse than even that. I mean, come on, look at all of Europe in the towards the end of World War II. Like that wasn't just every lending system on the continent, but like every monetary system practically. So we got this, guys. Don't believe the nonsense that we're seeing and that we will see increasingly, I suspect, from people like, oh, here's a laundry list of sad swamp defenders, people like Larry Summers, from formerly of Harvard University, former I believe Treasury Secretary, from people like Jason Delisle, who's just the worst, for people like Adam Mooney, these fake neutral nonpartisan analysts. He says he's from the Brookings Institution, but really he's from the Treasury Department. So we're going to see our opposition crawl and scream and beg and plead and cobble together every possible argument they can think of to save this dangerous, shouldn't be saved lending beast. And remember, guys, they may control most of the media. I get that. They may control a huge apparatus, both conservative and liberal in Washington, D.C., but they don't control us. We're the 45 million people who really are this lending system. This lending system disappears completely when we all, by popular unconsent, will that to happen. And that is happening, ladies and gentlemen. You shouldn't feel ashamed and alone and like it's you against the volcano or you against the world or whatever. No. We are the overwhelming majority of student loan borrowers. As I said before the pandemic, 80%. We're never going to be able to repay their loans. More than half weren't paying at all already before the pandemic. And another 20 or so percent were paying through the nose. People like Vanjie out there, who borrowed originally $26,000, has repaid $93,000 and still owes $132,000. Yeah, we've been paying this price. We don't need to suffer in silence. We got this. And quite frankly, I think we are due not only loan cancellation, but the wholesale investigation and firing, and quite frankly, I would say prosecution of some people in Washington, D.C., in the Department of Education and among the contractors, if warranted. And trust me, guys, it's warranted. I think if the FBI looked really hard, they would find, maybe even not that hard, they would find all manner of corruptions in and around the federal student loan system. They found it before and they were too weak to prosecute. Nobody went to jail, but people should have gone to jail. One guy got arrested, but I guarantee you the heinous, shameless corruption that is keeping this lending system floating and so forth, it's real. And there, I am sure, are a lot of illegal actions going on that shouldn't be too hard to find if you have the resources that an investigative entity like the FBI certainly does have. So, hey, Denise Peralt, how are you, Denise? Denise says the colleges are guilty too. So how much time do we have, Denise? I'm going to try and keep this short, but yes, the colleges are certainly party to this party. We found all manners of kickbacks going on between the colleges and the lenders, and even between the colleges and the Department of Education, although that's harder to prove. We found all manners of examples of that. College aid administrators were receiving kickbacks, including from very hoity-toity universities like Columbia, others. So there's a lot of different directions the fingers can point on this, but the colleges certainly are not above this. They are very culpable for this problem, and they know it. And shame on them if they're trying to undermine and sabotage us. They should be on our side. They have a duty to look out for the welfare of their own students. And they have been serving their students up on a platter to this lending beast. And shame on them for their silence. You know, sometimes the biggest sin is in omission. And this is what we've seen from the colleges for pretty much the whole entire time we've been fighting this battle.
Shame on them for their silence. You know, sometimes,
as I just said. So I have a couple more comments I'm seeing. And if I don't see your comments, let me just apologize in advance. So Doug says, we are here for you, Alan. We'll spread widely. Yes, please. If you forget everything that I say tonight, remember, please spread that Fox News interview. Find us on Twitter, like I said. Spread that thing around. More than that, what would be really helpful right now is if everybody in this group were to do a month or 2 months worth of our daily actions. So if you go to our website, studentloanjustice.org, and you will see the daily actions there. Do a month or 2 worth of our daily actions. They're quick. It's mostly Twitter stuff. You can do a week's worth of daily actions in probably less than 5 or 6 minutes. You can knock a month out in probably 20 minutes or less. You got to have a Twitter account, though. It's like 80% Twitter. So, hey, Joanna, how are you? Joanna says, good evening, Ellen. I did my part today. I appreciate that. You know, Joanna has been a real warrior for us for the past couple months. She's been out there making the effort that everybody should be making. Now, you're not better than Joanna. You're not better than me. You're not better than anybody in this group. If you think that you can stand above this and sort of cheerlead and eat popcorn and wait and watch and worry and hope that somebody is going to pull your weight for you, that never happens. Never happens. In the 17 years that I've been doing that has never, ever happened. You've got to pull your own weight on this. And believe it or not, this group here is sort of a bigger deal than you might think. We're really the tip of the spear in this fight. Much depends on what our members do or don't do. I don't think we'd have a bankruptcy. In fact, we would not have a bankruptcy bill to fight for, S-2598, which is very close to being passed in the Senate right now. We would not have that bill on the verge of passing, but for the work that our people in our group, you hopefully, have done to fight this fight. And this coming week, ladies and gentlemen, and I've said this in previous weeks, but it is still true. This coming week is the most important week in the history of our organization. I talked to the Senate last week, and I received confirmation that this coming week and the next coming week are going to make or break our bill. The bill is being marked up this week and next week. So what you do or what you don't do could have a very either dire or magnificent impact on whether this bill passes or not. So do those daily actions if you care at all. And if you don't do them, then you ought to be fucking ashamed of yourself, pardon my French. And quite frankly, you need to leave the group if you're not willing to do at least that much. You can do 2 months worth of daily actions in probably less than 45 minutes or a half an hour. It does not take long. And nobody's going to pull your weight for you. And I've been saying that for fucking years. But yet even still, on any given day, and we've got over 1 million members in our group, on any given day, I don't see more than maybe a couple thousand people doing stuff at most. That's way less than 1%. That's like 1/10 of 1%. That's ridiculous. It's disgusting. So if you want this problem solved, and I think you do, these are your loans, this is your problem, then the minimum that you will do is these daily actions. So please just do that. Hey, Lisa Ansel says hi. Kelly Kessler says will do. Lisa says, Alan, can you try and get on Tucker? I would love to, Lisa. We've been sharpening this sword for many years, and we will go toe-to-toe with Tucker, or we would have gone with Rush Limbaugh, may he rest in peace. We would love that. But, you know, the thing that will make that happen is stuff like retweeting that Fox News tweet. You know, if the Fox News people say, wow, this this show that we did on student loans was the most tweeted about of all week or month, then they'll be like, huh, there's something to this. Maybe we should have that guy back on. Like, that's the kind of thing. And by the way, guys, this isn't about me. I mean, if anybody else can go up and give these interviews, you should do that. You should throw your hat in the ring. I could care less, guys. I would love nothing more than take this banner behind me off the wall and throw it in the garbage. I want this problem solved. I want these loans gone. I want them gone. And whatever we need to do that is what I will do. And if it means I have to go on Fox News and mix it up with the Lions, then that is precisely what we need to do. So, and you should also take yourself out of this equation. You know, probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is when they get in an argument with somebody, all of a sudden they start talking about their loans. Well, my loan's this, my loan's that. As soon as you start talking about yourself, it's pretty much when you've lost the argument, because invariably you'll wind up being put on the defensive. It becomes about you, not about this problem, that you don't want to go there. You want to keep talking about this problem. The people on Fox News don't care about me. They don't care about who I am or nothing. They care about the problem. And 20% of Fox News' audience has student loans, by the way. And 80% of those guys were sweating bullets about their student loans. So that's, what is that? It's like 17% or something of everyone who watches Fox News is screwed on their student loans. We need them fighting with us. So it's just so important. So I see quite a few more comments here. Let me see if I can get in on them. Can we hear the C2? Oh, yeah, good point. Doug asked if we can hear the Coast to Coast interview without subscribing. I don't think you can, Doug. I actually downloaded a copy of the interview, but I think it's kind of illegal for me to repost that. So unless Coast to Coast has like a free membership thing, you may be out of luck. It may be that you would have had to have listened to it live, and that's too bad. I paid for my subscription. It's like $6 a month. It's not cheap. But if you like Coast to Coast, or if you like UFOs and alien and Bigfoot stuff, then it might be worth it. Just not just to hear the interview. Doug says, next interview first, before you get cut off, try to get out the root of the problem concerning never being eventually able to actually pay off the loan due to the interest and fees, and that so many are over 50. That's a great point, Doug. Doing these very quick live television interviews can be really tough, because you can't just completely disregard the questions and like go off on your own talking points. You have to incorporate their question into your answer. So sometimes it becomes easy. Sometimes it's not so easy to make all the points that you really need to make. I think I did kind of make that point in the Fox News thing. I said that before the pandemic, 80% of everyone was never going to be able to repay their loans. And that, it doesn't say what you said specifically. I did not mention the thing about people over 50 outnumbering people under the age of 25 with student loans. I would have loved to have been able to get that in. But, in a minute and a half interview or whatever, it was maybe a little longer than that. It's really hard to make all your points, but duly noted. Hey, Lisa says, SoFi stock plummeted last week. God does not reward those who thrive on the misery of others. Yeah, I think I noticed that actually, Lisa. And by the way, full disclosure, we don't have any money in this game. We don't have stock market. We're not investors. Nobody we know are investors. Nobody's paying us. We tell the truth, whatever that truth may be, ugly or pretty. We don't have our thumbs on the markets and we're trying to do this or that. We don't do any of that. And having said that, with absolutely zero financial interest in the whole thing, the student loans are going away, ladies and gentlemen. Federal students are going away. Federal student loans are going away. So whatever that translates into markets and whatever all that stuff means, I don't know. But the student loan program is done. It's finished. It's failed. It's breathing its last breath. So invest accordingly or something. But that's certainly not our fight. And SoFi, you need to change your business model. SoFi, you've been parasiting off the federal government and the taxpayers, which has been the large majority of your entire business model. You should find a new market to conquer, because this one is done. This jig is up. Believe me now, or wish you'd listen to me later. Denise says, did anyone receive a check from the Department of Education? I got one for $346. I have no idea, Denise. I have heard of a few other people getting like some weird rebates off of the pandemic thing. That's a little beneath this group. We're fighting for two things, by the way, guys. S-2598, which is going to return bankruptcy protection to student loans, and also the cancellation of all federally owned student loans. But that first thing I mentioned, bankruptcy, it is by far and away the most important. In fact, this is the most important policy point I'm going to make tonight. We are not going to see meaningful loan cancellation unless and until we get the threat, we get the leverage of bankruptcy back on our side. Nobody wants to file for bankruptcy. It's a terrible thing to have to do. It's shameful. It's defaming. It's unpleasant. And hopefully very few, maybe even no one, will actually have to file when we get the right return. But we have got to have that threat in our back pocket in every case if we want to see actual meaningful loan cancellation. Or maybe you just want to break on the interest. I don't know. A lot of people say that. Whatever solution you envision for yourself for your student loans, having the threat of bankruptcy is the key to unlock that universe. If we do not get bankruptcy returned, any loan cancellation that we see from President Biden is going to be fake. We've seen that movie before many times, dozens of times. Well, at least a half a dozen times, let's say, over the past 17 years. We are not going to see any kind of real student loan cancellation unless and until we get the threat of bankruptcy back on our side, which is why our bill, S-2598, is so freaking important, and why you need to be going to our website and doing at least 2 or 3 months worth of our daily actions. That's the least you can do. You know, this coming week, quite frankly, I would hope that I would suggest that people take time off work so that they can spend every waking hour fighting this battle with us. I know a lot of people probably won't do that, but at least I would hope that everybody within the sound of my voice, if getting these loans gone is important to you, would spend at least a half an hour or an hour a day helping us fight this battle. The next 2 weeks probably are going to tell the tale for us. It's just so important. Hey, Denise says, Denise says, when you send tweets, tag Miguel Cardona. That's a good point, Denise. As many times as we can call out the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, also the Undersecretary of Education, James Kvaal, Kvaal, also the Chief Operations Officer of the Federal Student Aid Office, good guy by the name of Richard Cordray, Cordray, the better. We need to be, and the more you can copy POTUS and even FLOTUS is also very, very, very good. We've got to put maximum pressure on the White House and the White House Department of Education, White House administration. Those names that I just mentioned are pretty key. Toby Merrill also would be a pretty good one. Tobymerrill, I believe is her name. These are all very important people. They should be on our side. They really should be. Maybe the last action item, the last angle that I will put before you, we really need Republicans to come around to our side of this issue. This is why we're so happy to go on shows like Fox News and even this Coast to Coast thing. We need to get more Republicans on our side. If you, the most powerful thing any individual on this group could ever do, and this is like a Superman thing, like one person could be the one person that makes this happen, is convince a Republican governor or a Republican senator to call on the president to cancel these loans. If anyone on this group can get even one of those things to happen, that's pretty much game over. We win. I kid you not. If Ron DeSantis was to stand up tomorrow and say, Mr. President, I will not have the great state of Florida conquered and enslaved by this big government debt. Mr. President, cancel these loans. That would be pretty much game over. We win. That would create a groundswell. And Ron DeSantis could and should do that, by the way. You know, the Florida state budget is $80 billion. The people of Florida owe $120 billion in mostly federal student loan debt. That's over $10 billion a year. It's around $10 billion a year in interest being sucked out of the state and sent to Washington, D.C. Ron DeSantis is probably my number one guy who I think would, could, and should, and might make a call like that. But there's others. Greg Abbott in Texas, governor of Texas. State of Texas owes $141 billion in mostly federal student loan debt. And on down the line, Ohio, Mike DeWine, $75 billion. South Carolina, a small state, people like Lindsey Graham or the governor of South Carolina, whose name I can't remember at the moment. I will probably within seconds after this live stream. Bill Lee of Tennessee, perfect example. Kay Ivey of Alabama. I think his name is John Sununu. You know Sununu, right? His son, John Sununu's son. Chris Sununu, I think his name is. New Hampshire. Christy Neame, South Dakota. I said Kay Ivey, Alabama. Brian Kemp of Georgia. The Georgia state budget is $48 billion. The people of Georgia owe $82 billion in mostly federal student loan debt. How did that last election go for the Republicans? Not very well. Student loan borrowers decided those elections. Brian Kemp, among all other Republican governors in this country, should be doing that thing that I just said, calling on the president to cancel loans by executive order, which the president can do without needing one dime from the Treasury or adding one penny to the national debt. So, hey, I think I'm starting to repeat myself here, guys. I think I'm going to wrap it up and wish you all a good weekend. In fact, more than that, wish you all the strongest week that you personally, individually have ever had in your own personal battle for student loan justice. I have a couple other questions I see here and comments. Not sure that I see any questions in there. Explain what that means. Denise says, seriously, they should be paying off my loans, right? I kind of feel like that a lot of the times too, Denise. You know, I feel like the Department of Education owes me a check for everything that I've lost, not made, everything, all the harms that have been done to me by this student loan debt. You know, I've got a laundry list of personal stuff, baggage. But yeah, I mean, in my view, the least that they could do is cancel all of these loans, replace this failed lending system, and frankly, apologize to all the people, particularly those people over the age of 50 who have seen their adult lives wrecked by these loans. Fucking makes blood shoot out of my eyes. Pardon my French. I'm actually serious about that. I would love to see some people go to jail out of this. Hey, Jeff Kaida, how are you? He says, I created a Twitter account for the first time so I could do the daily actions. Thank you for all that you do. We got your back. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You know, it takes a village, guys. I can't do this on my own. Obviously, I'm just a guy, one guy. Jeff can't do it on his own. Joanna can't, and Lisa and Doug, they can't do it on their own. I see them out there and I see them fighting this battle and I salute them all. If you are not one of those people, you need to turn over a new leaf because you can't expect this problem to get solved and the solution to fall into your lap. It's never worked that way. Not ever. Not ever. And the most important thing anybody can be doing right now is, as I said, doing our daily actions, fighting for this bill, S-2598. If you have private loans, you should probably be fighting for HR 4907. This whole thing gets solved when we get bankruptcy returned. There's also the Hail Mary of getting a Republican governor to do what I just said earlier. But where this problem truly is solved is in getting the constitutional bankruptcy rights that our founding fathers called for ahead of the power to declare war and raise an army in the Constitution back on our side. I'm telling you, whether you would ever or never file for bankruptcy, nobody wants to. Hopefully, few people will have to. Hopefully, nobody will have to. We've got to fight nonetheless to get this constitutional right back on our side, where it should have never been taken away from. So I see some people like Jeff Kaida's comment. I love that comment, Jeff. It takes a village, man. What can I tell you? Many hands make heavy work light. And don't run and hide and think that somebody's going to pull your weight for you. Never happens. Don't be that asshole who 5 years from now is like, wow, 5 years ago, I really could have gotten off my ass and done a little bit of tiny effort. And maybe I wouldn't be sitting here wrecked by my student loans, but I was lazy. Poor me. No. Don't be that guy. We want these loans gone. We want them gone. We want to disband this group, pop the champagne, and right off into the sunset. We're not here to build an empire. None of that nonsense. So Doug Grustfin says, 30 minutes a day will make a great difference on actions. I work full time and put in at least 2 hours a day throughout the day. Thank you, Doug. It shows. And it's so important for the state of Indiana, by the way. Indiana, like all the states that I've mentioned tonight, the people of Indiana owe more than the entire state budget of Indiana. Indiana is actually one of the worst states in terms of their legislators. Indiana is where this battle will be won. North Carolina is where this battle will be won, by the way. Texas, Florida is where this battle will be won. Vanji Unruh says, you are so brave. I don't know about brave, Vanji. I'm just telling the truth. And that's pretty easy to do. You don't have to muster too much courage to tell the truth. Our argument is very strong, guys. We have nothing more than the truth to guide us, and that is perfectly fine. We're fighting the good fight. We got the founders on our side. We have the facts on our side. We should have 45 million people on our side. But more than that, guys, this is the camel's nose under the tent. If they can do to other loans what they did to student loans, they could essentially turn this entire country into a slave state if they wanted to. And I kid you not, this is the camel's nose under the tent. This is a very important battle. We cannot let them take this hill. This is our hill. Much depends on our success. And I'm not even going to contemplate the thought of us failing because that's just not an option. Doug says, you did an excellent job for the time you had. We applaud your efforts. Oh, thank you, Doug. Hey, Kelly Kessler says, I post links from this group to every SoFi advertisement I get on Facebook. Good. And we don't have a special, we don't have a special bug up our ass for SoFi, but they are the guys fighting hardest against us. And shame on them for that. If they do that, they're going to suffer the consequences. Alan, can you clarify the 80% of borrowers being underwater before the pandemic versus the 64 people not paying? Yes, Lisa, I can. First of all, Betsy DeVos acknowledged in 2019, December, just before COVID hit, that 3/4 of all federal student loan borrowers were not able to make headway on their student loans. That means that they they all had increasing loan balances, so they were underwater. But more to the point, other Department of Education data reveals that 64.3% of all borrowers were not making payments. So according to Betsy DeVos, 75% were underwater before the pandemic. However, I talked personally to Mr. Wayne Johnson, who's a Trump appointee who actually ran the lending system under President Trump. And he told me in March of 2020, in the literally days before COVID became a real big deal, that 75% was closer to 80% more recently. So that comes basically from the horse's mouth, the guy who ran the federal lending system, Wayne Johnson. Lisa says, I want to get that stat right. Yes, you're right. I'm pretty precise when I use that as well, Lisa. It's very important that we don't give our opposition any reason to claim that we are putting out bad statistics. we put out only the best statistics, firsthand sources. Most of 95% of all the data that we use is Department of Education data. Like rarely we have to use other data, like for state budget data and, Pew polling data with regards to, political affiliation and so forth. But our data is sound. It's solid. It's as rock solid as you can possibly get in the student loan universe. And even our data is maybe not always perfect. I have a lot of questions about Department of Education data, but it's, for better or worse, the gold standard in this area. So getting our numbers right are extremely important because, believe me, the swamp, they will seize on any opportunity to, and they already do, to try and claim that our data is not correct. And if we actually put out some bad data, they would massacre us. That's guaranteed. So we don't do that. Vanjie says, me too. I created a Twitter account just for this. Yeah, that's a good strategy, actually. I know a lot of people are a little nervous about putting their real name behind stuff on Twitter and stuff like that. I get that. Creating a Twitter burner account just for the express purpose of retweeting our stuff is probably good. You want to be careful, though. There are some Twitter algorithm bots out there who apparently they do not like brand new accounts that all they do is retweet. So it's like we've had a few of our people say, hey, not many, but a few of our people have said, hey, I got suspended by Twitter for 2 weeks because I don't know why, but I was retweeting your stuff. So word to the wise, just, yeah. Don't get frustrated with the propaganda from Forbes and Fox. Stay with us for the real info. Oh, that's Doug talking to you. Yes, Doug. Doug, you said it very well. I don't have anything to add to that. So, all right, guys, I'm out. It's been a great week. This coming week is the most important. Let us all come together and fight, and let's make it the defining week in the history of the fight for student loan justice. That will happen when you make it happen. It will never happen unless and until you make it happen. So make it happen. These are your loans. This is your battle. We can't lose this when we all come together and do the small amount of work necessary to get this done. So I will be back tomorrow. In the meantime, good luck. God bless. And Godspeed, everybody.